grow confident.
As you watch this, your money is changing hands. To find out how and why, you need the latest business news at 15 minutes into each half hour, only on Headline News.
Iraq's positive response to the Soviet peace initiative is, of course, being monitored closely by the diplomatic community. CNN's Jeannie Most joins us now from the United Nations. Jeannie, what's the reaction there?
Well, actually, the announcement came at a really convenient time here. As is often the case, there was a cocktail reception going on upstairs right about the time of the announcement, and practically anyone here at the UN was, in terms of ambassadors, that is, was at this cocktail party, so it was relatively easy to get reaction. All they were talking about was this. The timing was such that reporters were actually explaining to the ambassadors what the announcement was, the details of the announcement. In any case, some initial reaction. The U.S. ambassador, no comment. He's waiting for the White House to say something. The British ambassador, likewise, is waiting for his government to react because he joked he wanted to keep his job. But China, a very important member of the UN Security Council, a permanent member, called this announcement a promising signal. He had great hopes for it. He said it should be considered very seriously, and he's glad that there was no linkage to the Middle East question. Other countries we talked to, Tunisia, a sympathetic country to Iraq, said he was relieved. Yemen, another country very sympathetic to Iraq, said, I loved it. He says it's almost too good to be true. He was worried he was too euphoric about this. And then we had reaction from some very important countries, Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Now, Egypt had a sort of positive reaction, and the Saudi ambassador was not so positive. Here's some of what they had to say.
The acceptance by Iraq to withdraw unconditionally from Kuwait, if this is to be made very clear, it will be a very important first step towards a political settlement.
My reaction to the conditioned unconditional withdrawal, too many conditions. If the war continues, it won't be any pretense of a UN war. It will be simply a US war, a Bush war.
The ambassador from Cuba went on to say if the U.S. doesn't accept this, it means it wants war. The Cuban ambassador also said that it's going to be very hard for the U.S. not to accept this. The plan, at least the initial reaction here at the UN, you get the feeling that it's going to be good enough for a lot of countries, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on the U.S. We're talking about countries, as I mentioned, China. The Soviet Union is obviously on board for this plan. It's its plan, and we haven't heard yet from France, another permanent member of the Security Council and member of the coalition. We do not expect a Security Council meeting tonight. We do expect one tomorrow. It's possible they could still have one tonight, but we don't think that's going to happen. We expect the Soviet ambassador tomorrow to brief the members of the Council on the details of this plan. And some diplomats here have pointed out that there are possible legal problems with some of the things in this plan. For instance, there's a legal problem possibly with simply erasing all 11 of the other resolutions that are part of the one calling for withdrawal. That could be a problem. There could be a problem with lifting the sanctions after withdrawal is two-thirds complete, because the resolutions call for total, complete, unconditional withdrawal. So there could be some legal problems. But again, the feeling here is that this could present a lot of problems for the U.S. because there are a lot of countries that seem to be pleased with this plan. I'm Jeannie Most reporting live from the United Nations.
Thank you, Jeannie. And this note, White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater was supposed to speak at 15 minutes past the hour to give the first White House reaction to the Soviet reaction, to the Iraqi reaction to the Soviet peace plan. We're getting word now that Marlin Fitzwater will be speaking in just a little bit over 10 minutes from now at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We will, of course, bring that to you live when it happens. Bernie?
While not part of the coalition lined up against Iraq, Israel does have a large interest in the outcome of the Gulf War. CNN's Richard Roth joins us now live from Tel Aviv with more. Richard?
It's 3 in the morning here local time, and instead of damage from a Scud attack, the Israeli leadership has something else to consider, this Iraqi-Soviet peace plan for Kuwait. There is no official Israeli government reaction yet. A foreign ministry official told CNN that the government would like to read and study the entire proposal before commenting. But a senior government official told CNN this morning that he was taken aback by the plan. The official said it will not work. and he predicted the terms would be unacceptable to the United States. Israel will not be satisfied with any plan which leaves Saddam Hussein in power and with most of his military force intact. A military correspondent for a leading Israeli newspaper told Israeli radio a little while ago that despite the terms unconditional withdrawal included in that agreement, there are still conditions in the agreement. He also thought the U.S. would turn it down. Of course, what you might be seeing and hearing now is a lot of wishful thinking and hoping on the part of the Israelis that the U.S. will indeed turn the plan down. One group of people who hope the plan will not be turned down are the Palestinians. They feel the U.S. should have accepted Saddam Hussein's earlier proposals and initiatives, and now they feel the war has gone on long enough.
Today, we have seen, felt the damage of war. We don't want to see it anymore. It was not only in the Gulf, but it was next door in Israel, in the occupied territories, the curfew, people suffering, hostage to the war, and we want to get rid of it. And the only way is for Israel to accept a process leading to exchange of land for peace.
Of course, Israel is bracing for a lot of pressure on the territories when the Kuwait conflict is resolved, but so far that is not resolved, and Israel insists there is no linkage, and of course linkage was not mentioned in this Iraqi-Soviet plan, or at least the part that's been made public so far. A few hours before the news from Moscow, we asked some Tel Aviv citizens about dealing with Saddam Hussein. After hearing about his speech, the people still don't trust him.
Saddam Hussein is not a person to make compromises with. The war must go on until the end. The Americans should not let him to go back with all his tanks and everything. They should destroy him once for all the countries around.
I don't think we should compromise about this situation, because we have to finish all these situations. We have to finish with Saddam. We have to kill him.
As passes between everything will be over.
Of course, Tel Aviv has been hit with a lot of those Scud missile attacks. The people here are still very angry. Israel has vowed to retaliate at an undisclosed time. Richard Roth, CNN, reporting live from Tel Aviv.
Thank you, Richard. And to remind you, we mentioned that White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater would be speaking at 8:15. That was revised. He will now come out, we're told, at 8:30. When he does, CNN will bring it to you live. We had hoped to be joined by Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the United States, Prince Bandar bin Sultan, but his government has requested that he not speak publicly about today's events at this time. Our coverage continues in a moment.
Big porterhouse. Very nice medium. The sound is like... Wait. It's not done. Now. Done. Done. A1 is how steak is done.
The first time I switched pain relievers, it was from aspirin to Tylenol. Then recently, I switched again, from Tylenol to Advil. You see, I got these really pounding headaches, and I found Tylenol didn't always get rid of all the pain. So I tried Advil and found that for my really tough headaches, 2 Advil worked better than 2 extra-strength Tylenol. That's the kind of relief I want. For my tough headaches, Advil just works better. Advil, tablets and caplets, advanced medicine for pain.
A big show is coming to town, and you may be able to get tickets, because from time to time, American Express reserves a block of good ones. Tickets for musicals, plays, even sporting events. Look for our ad in the paper, call us, order them, and you can pick them up right here. Only for very special events. And only for Gold Card members. The Gold Card, only from American Express. Don't leave home without it.
The New Yorker. It's been called the best magazine in the world, probably the best magazine that ever was. See if you agree. Call this number and get 52 weekly issues of the New Yorker for just $25.95. That's $65 off the cover price. Week after week, the quality of the New Yorker speaks for itself.
So call 1-800-257-1257 for 52 weekly issues of the best magazine in the world. Yes, the New Yorker.
A ceasefire would very definitely affect the battle plans of military commanders in the Gulf already geared up to launch a ground offensive. Our military affairs correspondent, Wolf Blitzer, joins us now with the Pentagon's perspective on today's events. Wolf?
Bernie, there is no official Pentagon reaction yet, but Pentagon officials privately say they are opposed on strictly military grounds to any ceasefire arrangement before the Iraqis begin a massive pullout from Kuwait. For days, the Pentagon has strongly opposed any ceasefire or pause in the war. Officials say they do not want to give Iraqi soldiers any chance to regroup or resupply simply because of an Iraqi declaration.
We feel very strongly that a ceasefire or pause of some kind would in fact be very dangerous from the standpoint of U.S. and allied forces.
But officials concede that this latest Soviet-Iraqi diplomatic maneuver could delay the start of the ground war. For days, they had been hinting that a ground war was imminent. The weather was right, the troops were ready to move. In advance of the Soviet announcement, U.S. military briefers made clear their view that they had the Iraqi forces on the ropes.
We're getting growing evidence that he's a very unhappy lot. In terms of water, we have some reports, for example, that sometimes it goes as much as 4 days without potable water, that sometimes it provided salt water to drink.
Now has an Air Force that's non-effective, a Navy that's non-effective, an Army that's been hammered now for 36 days, and the hammering has become more intense lately.
While awaiting orders from the White House, Pentagon officials say the air war continues, but the fate of the ground war right now is up in the air. Bernie?
Wolf, what is the thinking in the Pentagon as to why Saddam Hussein, fully aware that the United States would resist mightily any ceasefire before withdrawal, what's the thinking in the Pentagon as to what Saddam is trying to do by putting that proposal on the table?
Many officials here, intelligence officials and others, believe that Saddam Hussein is trying to stall for time, trying to delay the start of a ground war, hoping that some sort of diplomatic arrangement might yet save his regime. He would be able to point to it as some sort of diplomatic victory, even in the face of a major military setback.
Is there any question about whether the air war will continue regardless of what is happening diplomatically?
Well, certainly it will continue at least for the time being. I see no inclination in this building to stop the air war, but the ground war, plans for the ground war appeared earlier today to be all in place, ready to go, but that could be delayed depending on what the President of the United States decides.
Well, of course, I know you and everybody at the Pentagon, as well as everyone in Washington and around the world, is waiting to hear what White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater has to say. And if he comes out on schedule, that should be coming up in less than 3 minutes. We will continue our coverage in a moment.
This month, watch for your Discover Card application. It means you're already approved. Approved for the card that gives you cash back, yet charges you no annual fee. So just sign it and return to sender. It pays to Discover.
Basically, trucks are used for 2 reasons: hauling and towing. And for that, you need power. And the Sierra from GMC Truck has the most standard horsepower in its class, which gives you the hauling and towing strength you need. Plus, for 6 straight years, the full-size pickup from GMC Truck has retained more of its original value than any other in America. Sierra, powerful and durable. GMC Truck, it's not just a truck anymore. It's quality on the road.
The ground offensive. What can the Allies expect? Tank traps, minefields, and trenches of burning oil, chemical weapons, and the elite Republican Guard. Lessons of War, a prime-time special assignment, Saturday, 9 Eastern on CNN.
We are expecting first word of White House reaction from White House spokesman Marlon Fitzwater momentarily. We will also have congressional reaction to the Soviet response to the Iraqi response to the Soviet peace initiative. Our coverage will continue right after this.
Hi everybody, Jack Snow here for West Covina Toyota. Right now we're Xing down prices on all our best-selling models like 91 Camrys and Corollas. We've got a great selection to choose from at prices you've got to see to believe. There's discounts of up to $2,800 and you can save even more with applicable factory-to-dealer incentives and value packages on selected new 91 models. For low prices and big savings on 91 Camrys and Corollas, take the easy drive to West Covina Toyota, 821 South Glendora in West Covina. You'll love.
Find out how the Gulf War is affecting Southern California. Turn to Channel 2 Action News. First in the Southland to bring you a full hour of local Gulf War coverage at 3 o'clock. Not just headlines, not just updates. Channel 2's Trisha Toyota and Michael Tuck bring you complete local coverage of the Gulf War. At 3 o'clock, get a full hour of local news a full hour ahead. Watch Channel 2 Action News. Special Gulf War edition. Weekdays at 3. Watch what happens.
This is CNN.
Momentarily, we hope to bring you live remarks from White House spokesman Marlon Fitzwater offering official reaction to word that Iraq has responded positively to the Soviet peace plan. The Iraqi response was delivered during more than 2 hours of talks in Moscow between Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev and Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz. A Gorbachev spokesman says the two sides came to the conclusion that it is possible to find a way out of the military conflict in the Gulf based on an 8-point plan. That plan calls for a full and unconditional Iraqi withdrawal from Kuwait. The pullout would begin on the second day after a ceasefire and take place within a fixed time frame. The plan calls for an end to economic sanctions against Iraq after 2/3 of Iraq's forces are out of Kuwait. When the pullout is complete, all UN Security Council resolutions against Iraq would be withdrawn. All prisoners of war would be immediately released after a ceasefire. The Soviets in Iraq agreed to withdraw from Kuwait. The withdrawal from Kuwait would be monitored by neutral countries appointed by the United Nations. Further details of the peace plan are to be worked out and made public Friday.
And now for a check of the world financial markets, here's Jen Hopkins at the Business News Desk in New York. Jen?
Thanks, Bernie. The world's financial markets are reacting cautiously to Moscow's peace plan. In Tokyo, the Nikkei jumped 240 points in early trading. Now it is up to 79 points at 26,096. Earlier on Wall Street, stocks closed lower for the third day in a row. Investors today hesitated to take any position ahead of a possible ground war. Dow Industrials down 7 points. Now 180 million shares traded on the big board. Oil prices dropped in response to the Soviet initiative. Earlier today, a barrel of light sweet crude fell in New York trading $1.05 to close at $18.50 a barrel. That's the lowest level in 7 months. Right now in Tokyo trading, a barrel of Brent North Sea crude is down 60 cents to $16.25 a barrel. The dollar rose on early reports of the peace plan but failed to hold on to those gains. Right now the U.S. currency is down 1/3 of a yen against the Japanese currency, down 1/4 cent against the German mark, and off a fraction of a cent against the British pound. That's the latest from the Business News Desk in New York. I'm Jan Hopkins.
Thank you, Jan, and we will be right back.
Jack Patton, publisher of Business Week.
I'm proud that so many leading companies advertise in our pages. American Express.
Developed by himself and the foreign minister. President Bush thanked President Gorbachev for his intensive and useful efforts, but raised serious concerns about several points in the plan. President Bush said the United States will consult with its coalition partners on the proposal. We are in the process of examining the Soviet initiative tonight. The United States and its coalition partners continue to prosecute the war. That is the sum and substance of the situation that we have at this point. I'll try to answer a few questions.
Marlon, did President Gorbachev give any indication that once President Bush gave him these concerns, that he was going to take those back to his ease? And did he leave any hope that there may be some give on the part of Iraqis on those points the President raised?
We didn't discuss follow-on procedures. President Bush did say that we would be examining these points tonight, and we will be considering then how we intend to respond. I would not expect any response tonight, anything before tomorrow. But in terms of what happens then, that really is contingent upon how we view the various points in this plan and what action needs to be taken at that time. Excuse me, Helen?
What are the concerns? That one of the chief drawbacks is the administration.
Well, we don't want to go into the individual points. Of course, this plan was just announced by the Soviets very short time ago. The telephone conversation lasted approximately 33 minutes, and although they did get a chance to go through the major points, we obviously have a considerable analysis to do. But I would emphasize again that as they went through the various points, President Bush did state the concerns that he felt the coalition would have on this matter, both in terms of points that are in the plan that we have problems with, as well as issues that are not included. So there are a number of issues to resolve.
But this does hold up the ground war, doesn't it?
The ground war is a matter that is still under consideration. The war itself continues. We will continue to seek compliance with the UN resolutions, and the President will make decisions concerning the ground war as appropriate. This process that was initiated by the Soviets is continuing at a rather intensive pace, but there's no change at this point in our schedule for prosecution of the war.
This was during the meeting itself. Was Aziz in communication with the President? Was there any two-way on that?
No, there was no one else on the phone call and no other communications.
Does President Bush see now here a chance for the first time since August 2nd to reverse the invasion of Kuwait and actually come about this without launching a ground war?
Well, there have been innumerable chances since August 2nd in the sense that Saddam Hussein could have pulled out at any time. That still is the fastest and most efficient way to end this war. In terms of this initiative, it's just too soon to characterize it. We need to take a look at it, but I would say again that we have had our hopes raised before. After a serious examination, there have been significant problems, and certainly the President has indicated there could well be some difficulties here, but we are taking a look at it.
But how could he prosecute a ground war if indeed the talks are proceeding in Moscow?
Well, that's not a issue at the moment. We are proceeding the war. The air war continues. There's been no decision on the ground war at this time, and we continue to pursue the matter in the Persian Gulf in the most effective and efficient military way possible. Michael?
The President has said all along that the 12 UN resolutions are what Saddam Hussein must live up to. In the points that the President raised that he doesn't like, the possibility sounds like that there may be a negotiation underway to drop one or more of those points. Can the President live with anything less than full acceptance of all 12 as long as Iraq pulls out of Kuwait?
There is no negotiation underway with regard to the United States. I remind you again that this is a matter between the Soviet Union and Iraq, that we are commenting on their proposal, and we are not directly involved in that sense. I would repeat once again as well that full compliance with the 12 UN resolutions is the goal we seek, and those are the guideposts that we would use in judging any consideration of withdrawal.
Are you willing to go beyond those 12, though, to scale back any of those 12?
We have said repeatedly that we must have full compliance with the 12 UN resolutions. There's no change in that situation. Rita?
Marlon, aside from raising serious considerations here, you said that we've had our hopes raised before. While in the process of reviewing this, do you at least see that there is some hope here that this peace proposal could work if some of these problems that the President sees are worked out?
I just don't want to give it any characterization until we've had a chance to give it the full analysis of the United States government. Let's take one more question. Charles?
Well, and how can you say there are no negotiations going on when Gorbachev tells you his points and you tell him which ones are objectionable and basically ask him to go back to Tariq Aziz and say about these points? Are those not negotiations? Is he not negotiating on your behalf?
We haven't asked him to do anything. He's asked our views on these matters. We'll provide them as we have in the last few days. But I reiterate again that this is a matter between the Soviets and Iraq, and we are appreciative of the communication that has told us of these discussions, but we are not a part of the negotiations. Thank you very much.
White House spokesman Marlon Fitzwater appearing there in the briefing room using words very carefully selected by this man. Mr. Fitzwater reports that tonight, East Coast time, President Mikhail Gorbachev picked up the telephone and called President Bush in Washington, outlining all the major points of the Gorbachev peace proposal. Fitzwater says the president thanked Gorbachev, thanked him for his, quote, intensive and useful efforts. Our colleague, our senior correspondent at the White House, Charles Beerbaum, now is out of his chair. Charles, come on in and let's take a look at what Marlon had to say.
Well, there's something different tonight than what we've experienced over the past week. You may recall on Friday the Iraqis themselves held forth an initiative under which they would withdraw for the first time, indicating at least an acceptance of a principle of withdrawal with a lot of conditions attached, and the Bush administration rejected that. The word was rejection. And then at the beginning of this week, the Soviets had a proposal which President Bush said falls far short of what is needed. What Mr. Fitzwater did not say tonight is that there is a rejection or that it falls far short, but that rather there are concerns that President Bush iterated to President Gorbachev in their conversation, that he went through it point by point, suggesting what those concerns of the U.S. and its coalition partners might be. But what we are hearing tonight that we did not hear on the previous two instances is that there is something here worth studying. Mr. Fitzwater refused to accept any suggestion that the U.S. is engaged in negotiations or that the Soviets are negotiating on the U.S. behalf, but that may be more a matter of semantics than anything else, Bernie.
And Charles, two things stood out as I was taking notes on what Marlon Fitzwater had to say. One, his refusal to characterize this latest effort by Mr. Gorbachev, whereas a few days ago there was characterization. And also, Charles, you remember where Marlon Fitzwater spoke of full compliance with the 12 UN resolutions. He said full compliance with the 12 UN resolutions is the goal we seek. And then a couple of sentences later, he said there must be full compliance with the 12 UN resolutions. I was struck by his saying that's the goal we seek, and then coming back and making it firmer.
Well, there may be a point, Bernie, when you reach the situation where the Soviets and the Iraqis come up with what they consider an acceptable agreement, and it falls short of all 12 resolutions. Nevertheless, there is some redundancy in those resolutions, and without going through them, because I don't have them at hand here, there are some essential points, and one is the unconditional withdrawal. There is the restoration of the Kuwaiti government, which has not been addressed from Moscow. It's certainly conceivable that at some point you say this meets the essential elements of the UN resolutions, if not necessarily point by point going through all 12 of them. There are other concerns that Mr. Fitzwater declined to go into here, one of which, as we had it spelled out from Moscow, was that there would be a ceasefire and that withdrawal of Iraqi troops would begin 2 days after that. That has never been anything that the Bush administration, or for that matter any of the president's allies, have indicated would be acceptable. One of the things that has not appeared in the statement tonight is the idea of linkage to a broader Middle East plan. That may well have been something that Mr. Gorbachev was willing to drop after earlier communications from the White House. So we are seeing a process going on here. We have not reached the final stage. Indeed, in Moscow, we were hearing that there would be additional deliberation to come up with final details sometime tomorrow. It's already tomorrow in Moscow. And what we're told here is that they're going to continue to examine this. So we are at some midpoint here. We're not at an end as yet.
We certainly are not, Charles, and tomorrow should prove to be very interesting from where you report. Our senior White House correspondent, Charles Bibbauer. We'll be back in a moment.
Poor thing, you've got a real miserable cold, huh? Well, you could take Sudafed for your stuffy nose, plus chlorotrimazole for your sneezing, plus, yep, there's more, plus regular Tylenol for your aches and pains, plus, why are you looking at me like that? Plus Benylin DM for your cough. You don't want to take all these? Well, you can relieve all those symptoms with multi-symptom Comtrex. It's that simple. Just take Comtrex and you'll feel better.
Comtrex, all alone, it does it all.
Tonight on Sports Tonight, part 2 in our 3-part series on baseball, the state of the game with spring training already open for business. Also, all the basketball, including the Lakers at the Mavs at 11:30 Eastern Time. Tonight, join us.
We continue to get reaction to the Iraqi reaction to the Soviet peace proposal. CNN's Charles JЭККО is standing by live in Saudi Arabia. Charles, were you able to hear White House spokesman Marlon Fitzwater's statement, and were you able to get reaction from perhaps Saudi or U.S. military officials there?
We were able to hear Marlon Fitzwater's statements. No official reaction yet, because it is 5 minutes till 5 in the morning here.
But in truth, there are some conditions, important conditions, and tonight President Bush is studying them all. Our Stan Wilson is here with a close-up look at the Soviet peace plan and some of its potential problems. Stan?
Well, Pat and Larry, President Bush says tonight he does have some serious concerns about the peace plan. But, and this is important, he has not rejected it outright, as he has earlier proposals. Now, some observers are saying, in effect, Saddam has offered to surrender, not to the U.S. and its allies, but to the Soviet Union. Here are some of the highlights of the Soviet-Iraqi proposal. First, Iraq agrees to withdraw unconditionally from Kuwait. The withdrawal would start 2 days after a ceasefire, and it would be completed within a fixed time frame. Economic sanctions would be lifted after 2/3 of Iraq's forces have pulled out. The 12 UN resolutions against Iraq would then be declared void. All POWs would be freed immediately. The withdrawal would be monitored by neutral countries within the UN, and all in all, it is a major step, but there are still some serious concerns. The war goes on tonight, while President Bush and his advisors study the Soviet-Iraqi peace plan. The Soviets are calling the agreement a very positive step.
The two parties came to the conclusion that it is possible to find a way out of the military conflict in the Gulf.
In the plan, Saddam has agreed to abide by virtually all of the 12 UN Security Council resolutions, but there are critical exceptions. First, the payment of reparations to Kuwait. Resolution 674 states Iraq will be held liable for war damages and economic losses inflicted on Kuwait. And those losses are staggering. Physical damage and theft by Iraqi soldiers runs into the tens of billions of dollars. And the peace plan makes no mention of possible war crimes against the Kuwaiti people, of civilians tortured and hung in public.
There was a Kuwaiti woman there. She was in hysterics. She was screaming. The women, the soldiers, they took the bayonet and stuck it through her stomach and dragged her on the wall.
Nor does the peace plan address the mistreatment of Allied prisoners of war.
I feel for our leaders and our people.
President Bush was furious when captured pilots were paraded in front of Iraqi TV cameras in violation of the Geneva Conventions.
If he thought this brutal treatment of pilots is a way to muster world support, he is dead wrong.
And one final potential problem. The peace plan makes no mention of restoring Kuwait's pre-war government, as required by the UN resolutions. So some very serious problems remain to be solved, but politically, it may be difficult for President Bush to reject the plan. And Pat and Larry, Saddam is apparently trying to achieve diplomatically what he has been unable to achieve militarily so far. It remains to be seen how he does in this maneuver, but he's obviously a desperate man.
Interestingly enough, missing from the plan is also the linkage that was included previously of the Palestinian question.
Over and over again, Saddam tried to link his invasion of Kuwait with the problems on the West Bank and the Palestinian question. Obviously, he was unable to do this. President Bush and the Allies refusing even to discuss it, and it was left out of this plan. Very important point.
Still, in a very real sense, Israel could end up the big loser if the plan is accepted.
No doubt about it. Israel is probably the most worried right now. It was called the second worst scenario as far as the Israelis are concerned. The worst, of course, would be absolutely no action being taken at all against the Iraqis. So if Saddam comes out of this strengthened, it is Israel that potentially has the most to lose.
Thank you very much, sir.
We'll be certainly looking forward to hearing what the response would be tomorrow from the government. Meanwhile, tonight, caution is the operative word in Washington. The president's spokesman says Mr. Bush talked by phone with Soviet President Gorbachev this evening.
President Bush thanked President Gorbachev for his intensive and useful efforts, but raised serious concerns about several points in the plan.
The president is expected to examine the plan closely and will consult with our allies before reaching a final decision. The first comments coming from Capitol Hill tonight encouraged the president to be cautious. We will arrive to Washington for the very latest in just a few moments. But leaders around the world are also poring over the plan tonight, and initial reaction is mixed. Egypt's ambassador to the United Nations calls it a very important first step toward a political settlement. But the Saudi UN ambassador says the plan has too many conditions. A spokesman for the Kuwaiti Information Office insists Saddam Hussein face some kind of punishment, and the British Foreign Office also issued a statement saying it has no reaction at present, but is studying what's come out of the Moscow meeting.
The world not only has the peace plan to consider tonight, but also a bitter speech by Saddam Hussein over Baghdad radio earlier in the day.
Well, Iraq is clearly sending out mixed signals to the world. We have more now from our David Jackson, who joins us live on the phone from the island nation of Bahrain. And incidentally, we understand that Bahrain came under Iraqi Scud attack today. Is that right, David?
Well, that's right, Pat. That's at least what they are saying. It was not a major piece of news, surprisingly enough, even here in Bahrain. I was talking to some of the people that are downstairs here in this part of the capital city of Manama, Bahrain, and they weren't aware of it. There were no sirens here, and it's just something that's been reported as to have happened. The windows are taped, and there's been protection here, and the windows have been sealed in the hotels and things of that sort, really since the very beginning of the war, so they claim they were prepared for anything of this sort, but no debris fell anywhere near here, and nobody's really terribly sure of exactly how that attack took place or where it ended up finally. But I wanted to mention, as you said there, originally the radio broadcast that came out of Baghdad was heard with very warlike ears, let us say, in the Gulf states, and that includes Bahrain. The newspapers that came out, I mentioned this at 8 o'clock, came out immediately after the speech was released and was heard, and it came out before the announcement of Tariq Aziz's visit to Moscow and what resulted there. So they are expecting, when you look at the newspaper here, it's actually something interesting to say in a way, a full out-and-out ground war to be launched almost immediately because they felt the tone was so warlike in the speech.
Our people and armed forces are determined to continue the struggle. They are willing to sacrifice.
The speech over Baghdad radio was anxiously monitored all over the world, but it offered absolutely no sign that Saddam Hussein was about to surrender Kuwait. Instead, the Iraqi leader bitterly attacked President Bush and then went on to say that the world had not yet seen the full strength of the Iraqi army.
They don't want to confront our ground forces in southern Iraq. A lot of people still don't know the real capability of our army.
And Saddam Hussein again linked his invasion of Kuwait with the Palestinian issue.
Peace in the Gulf would open the door for comprehensive peace in the entire region and in Palestine as well. But they want us to surrender. Well, of course, they will be disappointed.
As if to punctuate his message, just a half an hour later, Saddam Hussein then sent a Scud missile towards Saudi Arabia. Patriot missiles fired back in defense. Officials say the Scud missile was intercepted and fell harmlessly in the desert with no injury or damage. Meanwhile, all over the world, people were closely examining Saddam Hussein's words.
and coming up with different assessments. In Jordan, supporters cheered what they thought was Hussein's intention to fight on.
I am very pleased because as a Palestinian, I should be pleased. Saddam is enough choice man to continue the war because he has no other choice.
But Palestinian leaders saw Saddam Hussein embracing peace.
He kept the door open by talking about peace as a matter of principle. He said that Iraq is committed to peace and that Iraq does want a peace process, but that it does not want capitulation or surrender.
While in Israel, Israeli officials continued to view Saddam Hussein with a very wary eye.
I think that what is important is not what he says, it's what he does. If he wants to comply with the international community's demands, there's a very simple way to do it. He simply can get out of Kuwait. It doesn't take very long. The entire world can see it within a matter of hours.
And again, I may know a little bit more about the reaction from the Gulf states, and particularly Bahrain, by next hour, perhaps, because people are getting up and getting around now at this point here. But again, in terms of the newspaper reporting, they all believe that a ground war will start within minutes because they only heard the radio message and not Tariq Aziz's assessment of things with the Soviets. So that will be an interesting turn of events here that will take place over about the next hour or so. Larry, Pat?
All right, we'll be talking with David again in about an hour.
Emotional whiplash in the Gulf states.
Well, on the battlefront, there's word that U.S. ground troops have begun making forays inside both Iraq and Kuwait.
These movements are seen as a prelude to an all-out ground war. We're going to go live now to Saudi Arabia and Charles Zeeley to see what effect tonight's diplomatic effects are having there.
Larry and Pat, the focus, of course, tonight has been on the actions from the Soviet Union and that peace proposal, but I got to tell you, the troops aren't buying it.
Facing a bloody ground war, troops were skeptical, distrustful of the Soviet peace proposal and Saddam Hussein.
I just wouldn't trust him, you know. So I look at it, we can either fight him now or fight him later.
There's no reason to stop now, and what we're doing is obviously succeeding.
So hopefully this time he's for real about it and he's going to get out.
Some troops want peace no matter what the price.
A human life is a human life. It doesn't matter, you know, who it is. To me, it's a human life. If a man has made a mistake, to me, I think God is going to deal with that man.
Initiatives to avert a ground war were a counterpoint to fire from the Royal Artillery. It was a massive barrage of bedlam and smoke. 72 guns and 12 multiple rocket launchers opened up in the heaviest shelling yet of the Iraqi positions. U.S. launchers bombarded enemy command posts, tanks, and infantry units with several hundred rounds of rockets, each capable of scattering 644 bomblets. Stepped-up cross-border activity was part of the effort to shape the battlefield as a prelude to an all-out ground offensive. Even with talk of peace, commanders were edgy.
I think the soldiers, as you can tell from interviewing, are just anxious to do something one way or the other, either have a peace initiative and go home or attack and get it over with.
Helicopters and fighter jets streaked northward again Thursday, blasting Iraqi guns and armored vehicles, seeing no need to let up.
We like to keep the pressure on as much as we can.
The human price for keeping the pressure on rose, meanwhile, when 7 American soldiers died in the crash of their Black Hawk medevac chopper like this one that went down while trying to land in bad weather in Saudi Arabia.
Larry and Pat, a lot of questions to be answered. The military here is not giving in. They want to continue the war. The White House, of course, is saying that the war will continue until more specifics are ironed out. Back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Charles. And as we just told you, President Bush is closely studying the peace proposal before reaching a final judgment.
We'll go live now to Judy Thornton, and she is in Washington for the latest. No response yet, I imagine, Judy.
Well, Pat and Larry, there's some high-level diplomacy going on at the White House right now. Certainly a very anxious and perhaps even nervous President Bush, huddling with advisors, trying to decide what the next step will be, whether or not to accept this Soviet peace plan. We understand that the president and his advisors have spoken with leaders of Canada, Britain, France, and Egypt already tonight in an effort to try to keep together the fragile coalition. As you might imagine, the administration is being very cautious.
President Bush said the United States will consult with its coalition partners on a proposal. We are in the process of examining the Soviet initiative tonight. The United States and its coalition partners continue to prosecute the war.
I'm certain President Bush will consider this very carefully, consider the source, consider whether or not this may be a stall by Saddam Hussein, and then obviously make the judgments in the best interest of our long-term national concerns in that area.
I think probably the largest question, at least in my mind, is whether or not we can simply waive all of the UN resolutions when they're out of Kuwait. That means we're waiving quite a bit, it seems to me, and would not be acceptable. On the other hand, I think we probably should not go forward with a ground war. The proposal is serious enough that should be further delayed.
This obviously puts great pressure on the president, and there are those who would say that we've achieved all our objectives. Yet there are many who can say that Saddam Hussein is permitted to go back with his armies basically intact, no reparations, no more sanctions, and that he can claim a great moral victory.
The White House tonight says that President Bush and his advisors will go over the plan point by point before they make any decision. Pat and Larry?
If there is agreement, Judy, among the allies to reject the initiative, there's certainly a sense in which President Bush must consider the domestic cost of rejecting this initiative, the cost in lives and so forth. Is there, that's certainly on the table tonight. Would you not think so?
Well, certainly. He has so many different considerations right now. In fact, I was hearing a little earlier, he's very concerned about offending President Gorbachev. He's afraid of offending a number of people, all the members of the coalition, both Arab nations and European nations, who have to worry about their own political considerations within their own countries. And then it's the domestic considerations as well. So President Bush, I would imagine this is going to be a very tense night for him as he weighs all of these different considerations in making his decision.
There are also the objectives that the war could end with a political solution and undercut what would certainly be a military victory for President Bush.
That's another point as well. The troops, we understand, are ready to go. As Charles Dewey just said, they are very skeptical of this plan. Many people are hoping there won't be a ground war. The troops, we understand, are ready to go. In fact, the Pentagon here in Washington, everyone has been ready to go. They're waiting for President Bush. So he also has that to consider as well in making his decision. And we understand from Marlon Fitzwater tonight that a ground war is still a possibility. It has not been ruled out at this point.
Well, Judy, we have some information that we can share with you and the rest of our viewers. This just crossed the wire. We understand that a senior Bush administration official says that the resolution is totally unacceptable. That's what we have heard. One of our wire sources quotes a senior Bush administration official as saying that they have rejected the proposal. So I guess we should let you go back to getting your information and trying to confirm that piece of information that we've just reported, so we can get on about the business of finding out exactly if this is true or not. But this is the latest piece of information that we have tonight. Thanks, Judy. We'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Story continues to break on an ongoing basis, as you can see. In Oceanside, meantime, news of a possible Iraqi withdrawal from Kuwait has triggered both excitement and skepticism.
Joe Avalar is in the town that's so closely linked to Camp Pendleton and Marines, and he joins us now with reaction. Joe, I don't know if you heard what we just reported.
I did, and of course that changes everything and changes the reaction. All I can talk to you about is the reaction earlier today in this town outside Camp Pendleton. There are only a few thousand Marines left at Camp Pendleton. The people I talked to earlier today, many of them Marines, were skeptical, as you said. They don't trust the Soviets. They're trained not to trust the Soviets, and they looked on the plan skeptically because of that. Other people who live in this town, were a little more hopeful. Let's listen to what they told us.
It's going to help peace and save a lot of lives, and I think it might be a good deal, but it looks like some fishing might be